You ever meet someone who seems totally in control, calm, confident, maybe even a little detached, but the closer you try to get, the more they pull away. Here's the truth they'll never admit: they want love just as much as you do. They just don't know how to feel safe wanting it. Today, I'm going to show you why the people who seem the most independent are often the ones aching the most for connection, and how that hidden desire shows up in ways they don't even realize. We often confuse independence with strength. We celebrate people who seem like they have it all together, the ones who never need help, who don't chase love, who always look like they're in control. But for many avoidant types, that independence isn't strength at all. It's armor. It's protection built layer by layer from years of believing that relying on someone means getting hurt. Somewhere along the way, they learned that closeness comes with a cost. Maybe they grew up in a home where vulnerability was punished, where love was inconsistent, or where they had to be the strong one before they ever got to be a child. Whatever the story, the result is the same. They learned that the safest way to love is from a distance. So now, as adults, they move through relationships with quiet control. They like people, they enjoy connection, they even fall in love. But the moment that love starts to feel like dependence, something in them recoils. Independence becomes their identity. It's not that they don't want someone, it's that needing someone feels dangerous. They'll say things like, "I just need space," or "I'm not good at emotional stuff," but underneath those words is a much more honest truth. "I'm scared you'll need me more than I can handle," or worse, "I'm scared that if I really let you in, I'll lose myself." This is why avoidants are so misunderstood. To the outside world, they seem self-sufficient, maybe even cold. But if you look closely, you'll notice the cracks. You'll see how carefully they choose who to let in, how quickly they shut down when emotions run deep, how their calm turns into distance right when things start to matter. It's not apathy, it's fear dressed up as control. They think that if they stay independent, they can't be hurt. But the truth is that armor keeps love out just as effectively as it keeps pain out. What makes this dynamic even more complex is that the avoidance independence often attracts people. Confidence is magnetic. Self-sufficiency looks appealing. But the partner who falls for that exterior eventually bumps up against the wall behind it. The warmth fades. The affection feels measured. Moments of closeness are followed by silence or withdrawal. And the partner starts to wonder what they did wrong, when in reality, it's not about them at all. It's about the avoidant trying to manage a lifetime of fear by staying in control of their emotions. Yet beneath all of that control is longing, a quiet, constant ache for someone who feels safe enough to hold their softness without judgment. Avoidants crave love, but they crave it in a way that doesn't threaten their autonomy. They want connection without losing their edge, intimacy without drowning in emotion. And that's why their independence, though impressive, is often a shield. They're not rejecting love, they're protecting themselves from it. But the very thing they built to stay safe is the same thing that keeps them lonely, a paradox that only starts to dissolve when they realize that strength isn't about building walls, it's about trusting someone enough to let them fall away. The most confusing thing about avoidance is that they often crave connection just as deeply as anyone else. They want love, closeness, intimacy. They just can't seem to hold on to it without feeling overwhelmed. It's a constant internal tug of war. Part of them wants to be fully seen, while another part panics the moment someone gets too close. This is the push-pull dynamic that defines so many of their relationships. When they're at a distance, they can idealize love. They can think about it, fantasize about it, even miss it. But when it's right there in front of them, when someone is ready to meet them emotionally, their instinct is to retreat. It's not that they suddenly stop caring or lose interest. In fact, the pullback often happens right after a moment of real intimacy. A deep conversation, a weekend spent together, a vulnerable exchange. That's when you'll see the shift. The tone changes, the energy cools, the communication becomes inconsistent. What they're really doing is trying to regulate the fear that comes with emotional closeness. To them, intimacy feels like a threat to their stability. When someone starts to matter too much, it stirs old fears of loss, rejection, or suffocation. So they create space, they pull away to calm the anxiety that closeness brings. But the paradox is that distance only makes them feel more alone, and loneliness reignites their longing for connection. So they come back, they reach out, send a message, suggest meeting up again. For the person on the receiving end, it feels like emotional whiplash. One moment they're wanted, the next they're pushed away. The avoidant isn't trying to play games, they're trying to manage their fear of vulnerability. The cycle repeats because the desire for love and the fear of dependence coexist inside them, constantly battling for control. This push-pull pattern often begins long before adulthood. It can be traced back to early experiences where love felt inconsistent, sometimes safe, sometimes suffocating. They learned that closeness leads to pain, so they became experts at staying half in and half out of connection. When things feel too good, they brace for the moment it will fall apart. When someone shows too much affection, they question the motive behind it. Their mind equates love with loss of control, so they protect themselves by retreating just enough to feel safe again. What's important to understand is that this behavior isn't coldness, it's self-preservation. They push away not because they want to be alone, but because they don't yet trust that closeness can be safe. Their nervous system is wired to see intimacy as danger, even when their heart wants it. It's a defense mechanism that worked once, maybe in childhood, but now sabotages the very thing they're seeking as adults. Inside, there's always that quiet ache. A hope that someone will understand that when they pull back, it's not rejection, but fear. And maybe if they can find a connection that doesn't demand or overwhelm, they can finally stop running from the thing they've wanted all along. For someone with avoidant tendencies, intimacy doesn't just mean being close, it means being exposed. It means letting another person see past the carefully curated version of themselves that they show to the world, the composed, capable, unbothered self. Beneath that surface lies a depth of emotion, sensitivity, and fear that they've spent years trying to manage or hide. To be truly seen feels like losing control, and that's terrifying. They worry that if someone gets too close, they'll discover the parts they've tried to bury. The insecurities, the need for reassurance, the fears of not being enough. And that once those parts are revealed, they'll be judged or rejected for them. So instead of opening up, they keep their distance. They keep conversations safe, shallow, or cleverly deflected with humor. Avoidants are often highly self-aware. They know that they feel uncomfortable when things get too emotional. They can even tell when they're starting to shut down, but that doesn't make it easier to stop. Their body reacts before their logic can intervene. They feel their heart rate quicken, their chest tighten, and their mind begins to look for an exit, a reason to leave, to end the call, to withdraw from the moment. They might blame work, business, or needing space, but those are just softer ways of saying, I'm scared to be seen. What makes this even more complicated is that avoidants often come across as calm under pressure. They're rarely the ones crying, shouting, or confessing their fears. On the outside, they look steady. On the inside, they're fighting a silent battle to stay emotionally safe. To an avoidant, vulnerability feels like handing someone a weapon. Because in their experience, the more someone knew them, the easier it became to hurt them. It's not about disinterest or arrogance. It's about protection. They learn that emotions can be used against them, that love can be conditional, and that being too open makes you easy to wound. So they developed a way of connecting that keeps them in control. They'll give enough to keep someone close, but never enough to truly risk themselves. They want love, but only if they can stay behind a layer of safety. You can often spot this in the way they communicate. They'll talk about ideas, plans, goals, or humor, but they'll avoid deep emotional territory. When someone asks them how they feel, they might pause too long or deflect with something logical. It's not because they don't have feelings. It's because they've learned to intellectualize them. Feelings are messy, unpredictable, and harder to control. Logic feels safe. Distance feels safe, control feels safe. But the irony is that this very control creates the loneliness they're trying to avoid. The wall they build to protect themselves from rejection also keeps out real intimacy. Deep down, they long for someone who won't see their hesitation as coldness, but as fear. Someone who can stay gentle long enough for them to realize that being seen isn't the same as being exposed. It's being accepted. For someone with avoidant tendencies, love isn't the problem. Dependence is. They can fall in love easily enough, often deeply and sincerely, but the moment they sense that the relationship is demanding too much of their emotional space, their guard goes up. They associate closeness with losing autonomy, and autonomy is everything to them. It's how they feel safe, in control, and grounded. They fear that if they rely on someone emotionally, they'll somehow lose themselves in the process. That fear often stems from past experiences where love felt engulfing. A parent who was intrusive, a relationship that demanded constant reassurance, or moments where their boundaries were ignored. So now, when someone starts to get close, they instinctively push back, not because they don't care, but because their nervous system equates intimacy with losing freedom. They're not looking for fireworks or intensity the way some people do. What they crave, even if they can't say it, is safety. They want to know that they can be close to someone without being consumed by them. This is why many avoidants often mistake emotional safety for boredom. When they meet someone calm, secure, and non-reactive, it can feel foreign, almost suspicious. They've been conditioned to associate love with anxiety or drama, so peaceful connection feels unfamiliar. But over time, if that person consistently shows stability and respect for their space, something begins to shift. Their walls don't fall all at once, but they soften. The avoidant starts to realize that intimacy doesn't have to mean surrendering control. It can be a shared freedom, two independent people choosing to stay close without losing themselves. This realization doesn't happen quickly. It requires consistency, patience, and emotional maturity from both sides. Avoidants test people without meaning to. They pull away to see if the other person will chase or shame them for it. If the reaction feels suffocating, they retreat further. But if the response is calm, respectful, and steady, it rewires something deep inside. They begin to see that closeness doesn't have to feel like captivity. It can feel safe, even liberating. The key is emotional safety, not intensity. Avoidants aren't afraid of love. They're afraid of the expectations that often come with it. They want to be loved for who they are, not for how well they perform emotional availability. They want a partner who understands that their quietness isn't distance but processing. They want connection without control, partnership without pressure, affection without obligation. And when they find that, when they realize they can be loved without being smothered, they begin to trust. Slowly, the protective layers start to fall away. What was once fear becomes openness. And what once felt like a loss of freedom becomes the purest form of it, choosing connection, not out of need or fear, but out of trust and desire. That's when love starts to feel like home instead of a threat. Healing for an avoidant doesn't happen through confrontation or being told to open up. It happens through understanding, patience, and safety. The instinct to withdraw isn't something they can just switch off. It's a deeply rooted form of self-protection that was built long before their adult relationships began. They learned that vulnerability led to pain, so they trained themselves to minimize emotional risk. But awareness, the moment they begin to see their own patterns clearly, is the first step toward change. When they realize that their distance isn't strength but fear, that pulling away isn't protecting them but isolating them, something begins to shift inside. They start to notice the discomfort that comes with running from closeness, and that awareness creates a small space for choice. Healing begins in that space, in the moment they pause before withdrawing and wonder what they're really afraid of. It's not about becoming instantly open or emotionally expressive. It's about learning to tolerate intimacy one small step at a time. Maybe it's sharing something personal without retreating afterward, or staying in a conversation even when it feels uncomfortable. Those moments are milestones for someone who's spent a lifetime equating connection with danger. Over time, with the right person or environment, these small risks begin to rewire the fear response that once controlled them. The right kind of relationship can accelerate this healing, not because the partner fixes them, but because the relationship becomes a safe place for growth. When someone responds to their withdrawal with understanding instead of judgment, the avoidant begins to learn that not everyone will punish or overwhelm them for needing space. When they're met with calm instead of criticism, their nervous system starts to relax. They realize that closeness doesn't always mean losing control. Sometimes it means being accepted exactly as they are. That acceptance is what allows the avoidant to open up. It's not grand gestures or emotional pressure that change them, but consistency, gentleness, and trust. For avoidants, healing isn't about becoming dependent or losing their independence. It's about integrating connection into their sense of self rather than seeing it as a threat to it. They begin to understand that intimacy and freedom aren't opposites, they can coexist. True emotional safety doesn't restrict them. It gives them the courage to be vulnerable without fear of being consumed. And once that shift happens, intimacy stops feeling like exposure and starts feeling like belonging. This process takes time, and it's rarely linear. There are moments of progress followed by retreat, openness followed by distance. But even in those setbacks, there's growth. Every time they come back a little sooner, open up a little deeper, or communicate a little more honestly, they're rewriting the story they once lived by. That love is unsafe. That closeness means loss. With awareness and connection, the avoidant begins to see that love, when healthy, is not something to survive, but something to trust. When you look at the avoidant, you're not seeing someone who doesn't care. You're seeing someone who cares so much that it scares them. You're seeing a person who spent years learning to survive by staying in control, who's built a life around self-reliance because it felt safer than relying on anyone else. But deep down, behind all that composure is a heart that still wants to be understood, still wants to be chosen, still wants to be loved without being trapped. Avoidants don't need to be fixed. They need to feel safe enough to stop protecting themselves all the time. They need someone who can meet their quiet with calm, their distance with patience, and their hesitation with understanding. Because when they finally feel safe, when they realize that love doesn't have to cost them their freedom, that's when they begin to open. That's when you see the truth behind the armor. A person who feels deeply, who loves fiercely, but has spent too long hiding that tenderness behind control. The real beauty of this journey is that healing doesn't just belong to the avoidant. It belongs to all of us. We've all learned in some way to protect ourselves from love. We've all built walls where we once needed boundaries. But love, real love, doesn't ask us to give ourselves away. It invites us to show up fully, to be seen and accepted for who we are, and to offer the same in return. When we stop seeing vulnerability as weakness and start seeing it as the bridge to connection, everything changes. So if you're someone who loves an avoidant, don't chase them, understand them. Be steady, not suffocating. Be patient, not passive. And if you're the avoidant, know this: you don't have to choose between independence and intimacy. You can have both. The walls you built to survive once served a purpose, but they don't have to define your future. The courage to love again, to be seen again, to trust again, that's the real strength. Thank you for listening, for being open to seeing what's often hidden behind silence, and for remembering that even the people who seem the most self-sufficient often need connection the most. I hope this conversation helps you see love and yourself a little differently. Thank you for your time, your heart, and your willingness to understand the deeper side of human connection. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.